Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York City jazz trumpeter Dave Scott. He's got some deep Kansas City roots, and he just swung through Kansas City in December of 2018 to do some live gigs. One of those was at the Black Dolphin, and it was an eclectic, electric audience. It was a great show. He is also releasing a brand new album in early 2019 called In Search of Hipness, and he's always doing that. So get to know Dave and dig this interview, my friends.
Dave, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz to talk about your new album, In Search of Hipness, and things beyond that.
My pleasure.
So first of all, I want to say that show in Kansas City this winter, when you were here over winter break, was one of probably the more eclectic rooms I've ever been to in Kansas City. There was such a buzz. There was such a audience, fascination. There was so much that was going on. How was your trip to Kansas City playing live at the Black Dolphin?
Oh, well, I love playing in Kansas City. Sometimes I play with local musicians, right, who are very good. And then there have been a couple of times when I brought my band from New York. And I remember, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, we played at the Blue Room on a Monday night, and the place was packed, and you could hear a pin drop. So, that says a lot to me for the Kansas City audiences and their openness to the music and the way they're willing to support the music. It says a lot. And then that just demonstrated again when we played at the Black Dolphin. Steve Cardenas, who's a great musician, lives here in New York as well, is a Kansas City native like myself. It's great when you come back and you play for a packed house like that. There's nothing like it. It's great. They're very receptive. The audiences are knowledgeable. Yeah. There are a lot of musicians in the audience too, which was great. A lot of our friends from Kansas City were musicians. And then, but the band was Matt Otto, who's now a local Kansas City musician. Ben Leiper, who's a local Kansas City musician, who's a great bass player. And then Marty Morrison, teaches down at the Missouri State. And he's originally from Hannibal, Missouri. But he plays around Kansas City a lot now. So, great. It was really a lot of fun and musically great all the way around.
Yeah, absolutely. So, your new album, In Search of Hipness, talk to me about what that title means before we get into the actual album.
Well, it's just something I came up with. It's like we're all constantly searching for, musically and otherwise, for the enlightenment, right? It's just something I came up with. I thought it would be kind of catchy. But, as musicians, we're always trying to find, it's kind of a jazz musician term to be hip, meaning you're up on things and you're doing things that are creative and new, and you have a certain insight, right? So that's kind of what the title means.
Let me ask you this. The album has a really great flow to it, and I really enjoyed listening to it. Talk to me about what your artistic vision with this project was.
Well, this band has been together for quite a while, and it first started, I had played with all these musicians off and on through the years, but I guess the band's been together for, I bet about 10 years now. Originally, I had a thought of something doing, other than the quintet, which is acoustic, something more maybe electric, like with an electric piano and then the guitar. And then also I had met Sarah, the violinist. I had gone to a concert. Some of my colleagues were composers of a composers collective, and they had a concert. And Sarah was in the ensemble. They had some strings and some different, kind of a cool configuration of strings and some winds, rhythm section. And so Sarah was in the ensemble, and I had seen her play before. We had done something else together once. I'd never really met her. I liked her playing, and so I just approached her. I said, I've always loved the sound of the violin, and I've never written anything for it or never actually played much with a violinist. And she was very receptive, and I said, well, let's get together. I'd like to learn more about the instrument and the range and what's possible on the instrument. And so she came over one afternoon and talked about it, and then we started to put together some, lack of a better word, jam sessions where we would just play. And a lot of it was open and free, more avant-garde kind of music. And so then that's when I came up with the idea of the violin band. Piano, bass, drums, and then added the guitar and the violin along with the trumpet. And it really ended up being more of an acoustic project than I had originally planned, just because of the musicians that were in the band. And then Jacob, the pianist, I played with quite a bit, and through the years, he's a great pianist. Dave, same thing. Dave's one of the first bass players I met when I first returned to New York in 2000, and I started playing with Dave quite a bit. And then Marcus, I've known him for a long time. And they're all great musicians, and you can play complex music, and they just play it very well. You know, they're very, very great improvisers, but they can also play very complex music and not drop a beat, you know.
So what do you want the end user to get out of this? The listener that picks this up after a show or is a fan of you and they listen to this, how do you want them to feel?
Just like anything, I want them to, you know, it's a combination of intellectual stimulation but also emotional stimulation, you know. And that's kind of what I look for when the musicians I play with, or the you know, the whole concept is, it's a combination of intellectual, you know, depth with the music, and there's a certain complexity to it, but along with energy and emotion and range of dynamics. And all these musicians are great at doing that, you know, range of dynamics meaning loud and soft, thinner textures and thicker textures, meaning, you know, dense, like where everybody's playing together and creating a wall of sound, and then where it's not so dense and more spacious, that sort of thing. So basically, I want people to feel, hopefully, you know, both of those stimulations, intellectual and emotional.
Well, I can tell you I did. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great album. And again, yeah, you bet. And that room was amazing when you were here. So, Dave, thank you for coming back to Kansas City. Thank you for the music, and I appreciate your time on Neon Jazz.
Hey, Joe, thanks. Anytime, man.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Dave for his time, his dedication, and his music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.